Good morning, everyone. My name is Edward Blackman. I'm currently a student as well as a full-time employee. Do a little bit of both worlds. I'm here to present on the skills matrix system, so hopefully you're in the right place. My background, I'm a Militian, Dr. Malat originally, so I did my master's quite a while ago, 17 years ago now. Through Western Michigan University, went to the field, got to learn from some great individuals, Dr. Karina Greger, Dr. Matt Miller. I got mentored by those. I greatly appreciate the comments this morning about mentorship. That's really helped me tremendously in my career. Worked a lot in OBM, IO, got involved into Six Sigma, learned what that was about, got certified, didn't like it much. A lot of statistical analysis, and honestly, from my point of view, an over-engineered tool for most of what we do. Then I got into Lean, found out that it's very different than Six Sigma, and very practical and very simple, and something I've been practicing ever since. Worked in a few different fields, also worked at night as an adjunct professor due to my educational background in mathematics and business as well as psychology. Then I returned to school a few years ago and started working on the PhD, studying under Dr. McGee. Thank you very much. Twitter handle, LinkedIn profile, be happy to connect with you and share any of the materials that you see today, okay? So don't worry about taking pictures and writing everything down. I'll just send you a slide deck if you're interested. This is straight from the agenda that was mentioned. I would like to introduce a tool to you that's a classic Lean tool, if you will, a Toyota tool. Demonstrate how it's been updated with behavioral science and made to actually be relevant, applicable, and widely liked. The setting for this, I've done this in multiple client settings as an internal employee as well as a consultant. The setting for today's presentation is a large manufacturer, global manufacturer based in Michigan, around here, I gotta do that. And they have about $13 billion in annual revenue. The setting for this specific experiment was within the IT department of about 600 people. Okay. By the way, I'm really fluent with this material, so it won't bother me at all if you have questions, you want to jump in, raise your hand, something like that. You won't throw me off. By the way, is this being webcast? I don't see any demonstration of that. Okay. History of the skills matrix. If you're familiar with TWI training within the industry, it was an approach to ramp up a large number of individuals in a short period of time, and so they designed what's called a standard work for training and developing fluency with skills. Toyota was a primary contributor to this approach. They also worked with Dr. Deming quite a bit. This approach has been used widely in manufacturing settings, but it's only more recent that this skills matrix system approach has been applied to administrative settings. So, number one question, what is the problem that we're actually trying to solve? What does the skills matrix help with? So I'm going to walk you through 5 modules that we use to actually conduct workshops with teams, and hopefully it'll help with your own personal fluency to be able to demonstrate this as well. One of the kickoff type starters that we do with these 2-hour workshops is we actually ask the team members, what struggles do you personally have with skills? So this is an example of the marker board presentation. Sometimes we do this on white paper as well, but we actually just ask the team. There's about a dozen people that are on the team, and they're present for this 2-hour workshop. We ask them, what are your personal struggles? So I'll flip back so you can see the cleanup version. But it's really standard stuff. What skills do I need for my job? What skills do I need to grow in my career path? What's the gap in fluency with those skills? Who can I go to learn more about this? Who can be my coach, right? Really basic stuff. Now, one of the struggles here is the organizations that I've worked with have all purchased really expensive software. And you probably heard some of the names out there. And they throw software at a behavioral problem and stand back a year later and are shocked that it didn't actually make a change. They changed software, they didn't change behavior to go with it, particularly leadership behavior as well. So after all these expensive software implementations, staff still have these struggles. Right? We look at these engagement scores on surveys and wonder why staff aren't engaged. Well, have you asked me how I can actually improve to develop my career? because that matters. That'll help with my engagement. I've implemented this personally in over 50 workshops across 3 industries so far. The list of questions that we get are pretty much the same every single time. So the top row, the green set, are the 5 modules of this 2-hour workshop. What I'm going to walk you through are these 5 modules. We'll dive into a little bit of each one of those. The second row, the lower row, is one of the things that I'd like to do in the future. We're not there yet. I don't actually have learning cycles. I haven't applied the second row yet. The second row is more theoretical. The top row has actually been applied a lot of times. So we'll walk through those step by step. But the idea is you have about a dozen team members. If a team is larger than that, you subgroup them based on similar skill sets, okay? But it's hard to manage and facilitate a group that's larger than 12. You're probably familiar with that. Then you walk them through this 2-hour workshop, and they walk out of the workshop in their hands an actual development plan to make their careers better, okay? So the first part, the kickoff. Usually I train the leader that's present in this about half an hour before the workshop so that they're the ones that are conducting some of these modules. The idea is they've been through assessments before, they've had them used as a punishment before. How do we assess and rank the bad ones, right? Ranking yank, I think is the common term, right? They've been through assessment workshops before, and the team members have been punished by it. We don't want that experience for this as well, right? We want this to actually be useful for them. One of the ways to do that is to have it highly participatory, right? As many of the team members that are there as possible participating and actually facilitating part of this event, so they walk out of the room fluent with this approach, using this approach, and buying into it after I'm gone. So the leader does the kickoff, and as you'll see, there's some basic steps that are involved. But the intent is the leader actually opens up with the struggle question, right? So they're the ones asking that and facilitating, writing up on the board what are the struggles that we have. Then we get into this fluency wheel. This thing's kind of neat. So the classic design for the fluency level is a quadrant design, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now you're probably familiar with a lot of different ways to assess fluency of some design. Here's even criteria that are out there for assessing the delivery of materials, right? Delivery of content. This is a slightly different take, right? Instead of the beginner, intermediate, advanced, highly proficient, things like that, this one, the highest level on this is actually coaching. Right? Many individuals will actually get up to level 3, independent. So the quadrants go through, and I'll just speak to it quickly. You have beginner, level 1, level 2, apprentice, no real reference to Trump in any way. Level 3, independent, level 4, coach. So many individuals, when they go into this, they struggle with the approach because, well, don't do that again. I've done my job for 20 years. Obviously, I'm the highest level. Well, no, the actual operational definition for this have coached others, right? So if you've done this for 20 years, you might be, hopefully, at least a level 3. You're independent. You don't actually require coaching assistance anymore. The day you've actually coached others, that's when you reach level 4, right? Make sense? And as we all know, not all level 3s make really good level 4s. Just because you're highly independent and fluent at a given topic or skill doesn't mean you're necessarily good at coaching it. Another nuance on this. The classic design that's been used in manufacturing is can perform the skill independently. The way that this has been updated with behavioral science is to make it more accomplishment-based criteria. It's not that I can do something, it's I have done something, right? It's more observable. I can validate that this actually occurred. One of the issues that teams have with scales like this is the subjectivity of it. Well, I could be a 3 on this, or maybe a 1 on this. It's really subjective. Now, that said, this is still a subjective rating system, but we're trying to reduce some of the subjectivity and make it more objective, okay? More observable helps with that. So, level 1 tends to be I've studied it in some regard. I've read the book, I've watched a module on it, things like that. We typically use the example of golfing, right? Golfing as a skill. So, God help me, I've actually watched videos on golfing, right? I can see that you're all envious of that. But I've studied it in some regard. If there's a book out there, I've studied the book on golfing, right? Level 2 is I performed golfing with the assistance of a coach, right? We can define the successful criteria for level 2 as well. I personally think I'm kind of at a level 2. I have a horrible, is it a slice when it goes to the right or a hook? Always forget. Anybody?
Slice.
Slice. Horrible slice. When I'm at the driving range, people are scared for their cars, right? It actually goes in there and dings a little while. I would actually like to be a level higher than that. I would like to not embarrass myself at the golf course anymore, okay? So I would put myself at a level 2. Not a level 3 yet, definitely not level 4 yet, okay? Again, this is past tense, accomplishment-based criteria. So it's not I can read the book, it's I have read the book, right? And to use an extreme example, it's not I can fly to the moon, it's I have flown to the moon. Two entirely different criteria. Yes, sir?
Why is it a wheel instead of a line?
So it was originally set up that way and it's stuck, right? So it's just never changed, and it's been over 60 years now, and that approach is just stuck. So honestly, I went with it. Another question that pops up is, why is the first quadrant in the upper right, not the upper left? Because that's how it was originally designed, and it's stuck. So we teach them the fluency wheel, and obviously this is another part that the leader can teach. We do this marker board style. Part of the idea with this is we want this approach to be nimble, agile, adaptable, right? So this workshop is actually never run with PowerPoint slides. Doing it like this is honestly a little strange for me. I almost always do this on a marker board. The idea is if they're in a meeting, if they're in a project discussion, and they have the question of the classic 2 C's. Do we have the capability and the capacity? Do we have people with certain skills, and are they available, right? They can draw this on the marker board on the fly. It will not be an impediment to making progress in the discussion, right? So teach it the way you want them to use it. Make sense? So we teach it marker board style. We teach them the fluency wheel. They ask a few questions about it, and then we move on to the build. Colors. Make it simple. Love the presentation this morning. Make it simple, make it understandable. What's the quote from, is it Einstein? Make it as simple as possible, but not more simple. Something like that. Then we teach the colors. Green is their current fluency level. Red, goal fluency level. Really basic, really straightforward. So highly visible, at a glance, they're able to identify, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be. As is to be, current state, future state. Highly visible. Now, you might be asking, what's the red based on? Red is based on actually 2 criteria, right? So if you look at a fluency level, you'll have blank, there's no fluency at all. Green, current fluency level, red, goal fluency level. Goal fluency level is based on one or potentially both of 2 things. Business need first, and or personal desire. Now here's the thing, I've had a lot of debates with leaders. Should we really include personal desire? Isn't this all business need driven? No! Care about your people. What if they have a desire that doesn't line up with their current job? Wouldn't we actually want to accommodate that? Wouldn't it be great if both criteria line up? There's a business need for me to acquire facilitation or meeting facilitation skills, right? There's a business need for it. I really don't want to do it. I don't like getting in front of groups, right? What if it's actually the opposite? There's a business need for it, and I want to acquire the skill, because to get into a leadership role, I need to be more fluent with presenting to groups. That's a good alignment. To use a Star Wars reference, there's a good vergence of the Force. Any questions on this? Sir?
One question that I have is that the sort of definition of fluency originally is, aligned with Skinner's variable rate of response, and there's a time dimension. So that's kind of implicit in this, but how do you, I guess, why choose that word?
Yes. So the language used in this matters a lot. Try to avoid the word assessment as much as possible when we're conducting these. And experimenting with these across a lot of teams, people don't seem resistant to using the term fluency, right? So I originally actually started using it just because of a soft skill approach, right? People were more receptive to the term fluency than anything else, right? I wasn't originally trying to align it with the Skinner's approach. Now, that said, there is a time dimension that's part of this as well. Yeah, and so the time dimension is typically for the reds, it's a 1-year horizon, right? right? And we'll get into and this is documented in here as well, the transition from the overall 1-year plan to the immediate 3-month plan. Now for the greens, it tends to be an operational definition relative to the skill. So I've done this a lot with IT settings, right? And if you've worked with IT folks in the past, technology changes rapidly, right? So facilitating meetings, some of those techniques, right, have been fairly static for a period of time, right? So if I've done it, if I was a level 2 5 years ago, I might still be a level 2. Whereas coding Java, right? It's a programming language. Coding Java, if I was a level 2 or a level 3 5 years ago, I'm back to level 1 now, right? If I haven't done it since then, right? So part of the operational definition is skill specific based on the, what's the term? How the skill expires over time. There's a better word for that, but I'm blanking out on it at the time. So the team actually helps define those operational definitions to identify whether or not the skill expires and what the time horizon for those are. Sir?
Do you ever have any issues with people self-identifying as level 4 as coaches simply because they think that they've coached at people but haven't really influenced behavior?
Yes. So another part of this, and it was implicit as well, this is a team-based design, right? So this workshop is done as a team, not as individuals sitting at their desk. Certainly not done as the leader sitting at his or her desk doing the assessment on the entire team. Now the reason we do this is team members work with one another, right? They're the individuals who, if you will, are most familiar with one another's fluency levels. And so there's a technique in here called respectfully challenge. And you can respectfully challenge up or down. So as we're going through this, and I'll get into it a little bit more later, respectful challenges actually do occur as part of it and are encouraged because of the, if you will, the inability of some individuals to self-identify their own fluency level. But we'll get into that in a couple minutes. So to build on this, so have the kickoff, where is the problem we're trying to solve, where are the struggles, teach the fluency level, teach the color coding, and then is the matrix itself. Draw this on a marker board. Now, the horizontal along the top are the skills. The vertical are the names. The intersection of the two is the fluency wheel. Keep track of that? Okay. So by individual, by skill, you have a view of an entire team of their reds and their greens. You can see relative skill fluency across an entire team. When leaders see this step, this is when they start salivating, right? Because they can start to see gaps, skill-based gaps that they couldn't see before, that they can start planning on and coaching on. It does wonders for them. So you draw this, and as you can tell, drawing circles is not a skill gap for me, it's an ability gap. I've done this so many times, I just flat out can't do it. I have no artistic talent at all. Doesn't matter how much you try to teach me, I'm not going to be good at that. I need a protractor or something like that. This is actually one of mine, and yeah, if those ADHD folks around here, you're not driving me nuts, I'm sorry. So then we populate this with actual skills, with names and colors. Typically, honestly, if this is the first workshop that they've been through, we start with only greens. People having a slight aversion to red, right? Particularly when they see red intersecting with their own personal name, right? They tend to associate their job with their sense of worth. We have to be cognizant of that. So we start with greens, work through about 3 columns until they're comfortable, right? We can operationally define comfortable. They go from debating, am I 1, am I 2, what do you think, am I here or there, to they get to the 2nd column, to they get to the 3rd column, and they're just saying L3. And the entire team is just calling out their current fluency levels quickly. It's a demonstration of comfort with this. Once they go through that, we start to identify the reds, right? So it's okay, there's more comfort and trust in the room. Yeah, I'm gonna use some of these words. There's more trust in the room to actually identify the reds. And so we go through and identify goal fluency levels. Once we're beyond about the 3rd column, and usually this is about, this part takes about 10 minutes for this step, module 3, for the 3rd column. Then we start doing red and greens at the same time. And so what it looks like is team members will just say green L1, red L3. And it goes rather quickly that way. This is actually another opportunity to get higher levels of participation. The matrix is drawn on there. The definitions of the fluency levels are known among the team. I actually try to leave that up on the board so they can constantly refer back to it until they're fluent with the fluency wheel itself. A little meta, but you get it. Then I just simply mark or certify one of the team members. Usually it's one of the quietest people in the room. All I'm doing is filling in reds and greens, right? It doesn't take a master's degree to do that. So increase the participation level, have them come up there. The team then increases their ownership by having one of their own run the show, right? By the way, they also, the quiet one then is allowed to do a little bit of payback for anybody that was antagonizing them and marker certify the next individual. Yes, sir?
When you're defining the skills that run along there, how nitpicky do you get with the definitions of the skills and how precise they are?
I usually assign a note taker because the team will start creating the operational definition actually during the workshop. And when they have levels of agreement, I want to not lose that. And so there can be artifacts that come out of a work product that they use as definitions for each of the levels, right? For example, producing a given worksheet, right, that everybody agrees is of high quality. Well, they've never had discussions like that before. So they're actually creating these definitions and identifying them on the fly. I like to conduct these first round with more hard skills than soft skills. Hard skills, honestly, is just easier. Coding Java is, if you will, a hard skill relative to leading. I would call leading more of a soft skill, right? Well, it's really hard for teams to have a debate on what does leading mean, how do we operationally define that, versus coding Java, right? That's much easier for teams to grasp. As they develop their fluency with skill identification, then we'll transition over to soft skills as well. Okay. We use anchors as well. So team-based anchors, right? What would you consider a level 3, right? Again, this is highly subjective, but getting through the first round, we have to make progress during the workshop. Other questions? So I've tried to work with the existing infrastructure of organizations, including HR in the past, to help predefine some of the skills that are in here. Honestly, I haven't had a lot of success. One of the highest frustration levels I had was when there was a skill bank that was already identified. I got excited. Great, you have skills identified by role, by level. So a director that's at a senior level in IT or finance, these are the leadership skills they should have. Great, show me, share this with me, right? And so and it happens every time. I need to stop getting excited about this. They pull it up and there are things in there like nobility. And my heart sinks. So, okay, so you're calling nobility a leadership skill, right? And I learned over the years, I've been doing this a while, you scream on the inside every time you have one of those moments. Don't scream on the outside. You want to work with folks and you want to be cooperative, but we're not talking about the same thing at all. Nobility's nice. Yeah, maybe it's a value or a virtue for an organization, but I'm not going to teach somebody level 1 to level 3 on nobility. We're not talking about the same thing. What is the demonstration of nobility in a meeting, in a project? How's it relevant, right? So one of the struggles that we've had is what are good operational definitions that have already been validated and exist for skills, right? There are some banks out there for hard skills. I'm struggling with some of the softer skills, honestly. The amount of debates that we have about leadership and leading has been tremendous. There's also a question of granularity pops up, just like with golf, and that's why, or golfing, I should say, ing, you want to verbify it so it's an actual action, right? What is the level of granularity that you get into from golfing along the top? Is golfing enough, or do I distinguish between putting, chipping, driving, drinking, right? Things like that. I tend to use the language parent-child relationships between skills, right? There is a relationship between those, and we can demonstrate that. And using parent and child as the language in the facilitation, you see people quickly adopt that as well and start to define skills in terms of parent and child as well. There's also grandparent skills and things like that, okay? The level of granularity depends on what is the business need. Am I only going to teach chipping and never driving? Is there a business need for that distinction, right? We have individuals that only have one skill versus another, right? You have these debates. Actually kind of exciting. Oh, sorry, the last part of the third step is prioritization. This is a scary moment. And actually there's a lot of scary ones going through this, but one of the scary moments is Dr. Sundberg, over the next 3 months, what is the #1 skill that you need to develop, right? And he sits there looking at me like this, and the leader looks at me like that. The entire team starts thinking, oh, what's the #1 skill I need to develop over the next 3 months? We never really thought about it that way. We prioritized work, projects, meetings all the time. How do we develop and prioritize our own skill development? There's a collective pause. It's fascinating. The leaders that have a lot of forward thinking, are futurists in some sense, already have a roadmap developed of the work that their team is going to accomplish over the next year. Well, skill development should align up with the work that you tend to accomplish over the next year. So that's an easy out. You can line up those two and they should prioritize in the same fashion. Most of the time, most of the leaders I work with do not have a tangible roadmap of accomplishments they're going to make over the next year, right? It's more unusual. So this is a first for them. They actually have to prioritize for the first time. I force them to do it during the first workshop. You have to at least prioritize one, right? But this can all be revised. Again, we're doing this all on marker board. This isn't done in stone, right? It's a bit of a thought exercise to get fluent with the approach. We can reprioritize later. I would highly suggest not reprioritizing too many times. You shift the focus too many times, it just becomes a mess, right? Try to stick to something and stay with it for at least 3 months, 1 quarter. But it's a struggle. Questions on that piece? Yeah.
What were you saying about parent-child relationship with skills?
Skills. So a parent skill may be golfing. A child skill may be putting, chipping, driving, right? So it's a grouping technique. Major groups, subgroups. The fourth step, why we're really doing this, is the personal development plan. Sometimes these are called individual development plans as well. The whole point of doing all of this is for them to walk out of the room with an actual solid development plan. Again, I found that in borrowing from some of the lean Toyota techniques, make this as visible as possible, right? 5 feet, 5 seconds, they understand what a PDP is. So with this in mind, you can see current level, goal level. This is the skill. This is where I'm at, where I want to be, as is to be, current state, future state, whatever language you want to use. These are the actions to close the gap. You completed the action, you check it off. So again, this is where we have somebody else come up and run through this piece that we actually developed that person's PDP live, right, as a demonstration of the concept. Hand out a sheet of paper for everybody in the room, and they start working on their own. The #1 skill that comes up here comes from the matrix itself, the #1 priority, then the #2, then the #3 priority. It all ties right into one another. Okay. Now this is another struggle. So how do you develop skills? You saw this in one of the intro slides. They don't actually know how to do that. Well, now we have a coaching-based criterion model. Right? 3 of the levels of the fluency wheel have coaching as part of it. So this is where I'm a strong proponent of pairing. Right? Mentorship goes a long way. There are people that have figured this out already. When I came straight out of school 17 years ago, I was extremely green. I had great mentors that helped me learn, Dr. Miller, Dr. Greger, things like that. It was wonderful. So now, with the matrix, they have identified level 4 coaches. It's visible. They know who to go to learn specific skills. It's easy. There's no mystery anymore, right? That's fascinating. Now, this gets into that those 2 rows that we talked about at the very beginning. We're still working on the first row. The second row is, well, we're talking about mentorship within a team. But certain skills aren't isolated to a given team. Meeting facilitation, well, why do I need to stick to IT to find somebody to coach me on a meeting facilitator? Could I go to HR? I imagine they have some good meeting facilitators over there. May I see their skills matrix? If there's not a meeting facilitator that's available at level 4 within IT, can I go to HR or finance, right? There are some skills that are, if you will, area agnostic. So we're not there yet. We'd like to see that, but that's doing this work at an organizational level. Okay? So they walk through and create these PDPs on their own. So time check. We're doing okay? Questions on this piece? There's another useful piece on this. Some training stinks. And a lot of people have already figured that out. So let's share that. We also know some of the training that works really well. So the people that are level 3s, honestly, they've typically identified already what online training courses are good versus bad, what modules are good versus bad, what industry experts they would hire to help them out versus which ones they would avoid. Please share that. Somebody else is trying to go through the same plan as you. They're trying to get up to a level 3, just like you. Share what training is effective and what training to avoid. Okay? It's another contribution that level 3s and the level 4s can provide. Actually, I want to go back for a second to one of Dan's questions. So, respectful challenge. Let's spend a minute on there. So we're doing this as a team, and I self-identify that. I was going to not do that anymore. I self-identify that I'm a level 1, and what sometimes happens is you call me out. Say, I would like to respectfully challenge, and I teach them to use those words because this is going south really quick, right? I would like to respectfully challenge. When I came on board on this team, you're the one that taught me how to do my job. You're the one that taught everybody else how to do their job. And you see the other people in the room nod. Sir, ma'am, you're a level 4. You're the best level 4 we have, right? So that's a respectful challenge. Up. Those usually go well. See where I'm going with this, don't you? Then there's the respectful challenges down. These honestly have been less frequent. At this point in the workshop, they're actually starting to act like a true team, not a Tino. You're probably familiar with the team Rhino, Republican in name only. Tino, team in name only. They report to the same boss, but they really don't collaborate, share, help each other out that much. They're all individuals that report on their work. So this is, by this point in the workshop, they're actually acting like a real team, not a Tino. Okay? Unfortunately, sometimes we have the respectful challenges down. So a story that exemplifies this. We had an individual that self-identified as a level 4. I successfully coached others on a given skill for a given period of time. The individual in the room, and you all know this person, who knows everything, corrects everybody, and is the only one that really should be talking all the time, right? Because everybody else needs to learn from him or her. So that person spoke up, couldn't take it anymore. Oh, I've heard enough nonsense. You are not a level 4, you're a level 1. I'm a level 4, right? and so if you guys have heard, Dr. Malak is kind of extreme on some stuff, but some stuff he's great as a model. Keeping his cool is one of those, right? And I've learned from this gentleman great examples, and I've seen great examples of how he keeps his cool. So this person who self-identified as a level 4 and just got slammed by the know-it-all sits there calm, cool, and collected. On the side, I've taught this subject as an adjunct professor for the last decade. I've taught 1,000 students how to do this. Calm, cool, and collected. The know-it-all, shrank. Turned out, this is another very useful byproduct of these meetings. Not everyone knows what other skills you have. Just because you're doing certain functions in your day job does not mean that's what you're limited to. People have other interests they've simply not had the opportunity to express before. Now we can see it. I get a little passionate about it, but it's amazing to see people light up, right? They've finally been able to express some of their value. It's cool. All right, preach, sermon over. So a build. The reason there's 5 modules, not 3. Originally I started out with 3 modules. I adapted the approach that I saw in industry, modernized it a little bit with behavioral science, and started doing learning cycles with it, started experimenting with it. And to close the loop on that, I would follow up with teams about 3 months later. How's it going? Have any of your reds turned green, right? Really basic demonstration of advancement on this. Have any of the action plan items you've done improved in any way, right? Well, we didn't make any action plan items. What do you mean? You have a matrix now. You have a highly visible way of seeing current and goal fluency level for the entire team. You didn't make any progress. Why? What's going on? And we start delving into the root cause analysis on this. Well, I didn't know how. Okay, what do you mean by that? Well, I don't know where to go, what to do with this. How do I get somebody's time if they are a coach? Oh, okay, so we added module 4, created very specific behavioral, personal development plans, PDPs, IDPs, to make it even more obvious how to close the gap between current and goal. Then start following it up 3 months later. Okay, now there should be movement. Now reds should be turning green. Well, there were still struggles. Yes, more people were making progress, but they were still struggling. So we added step 5 based on the root cause analysis we did with that. Operationalize. Yeah, it's a fancy term, but basically it just means how do you make this real? And we found that there's certain structural elements that we can add to this to help make it real. If you have one-on-one meetings with your manager, why not build into the structured agenda to review your personal development plan? So that on a weekly basis or every 2 weeks, you're actually discussing this. This is a structured topic that's going on. When you have team meetings, build it into a structured agenda item that this is one of the topics that you go over. Make it visible. Print off, banner print, and teams will do this. Banner print off your entire team matrix, right? We do it on a marker board. You can just take a picture of it and print it off large as life and post it in your team space so that it's always present, always visible, always top of mind, if you will. We found that if we do this, we add these structural elements, people are more likely to have their reds turn green. Another item, a lot of these areas I've done this with, particularly in this client setting, was an IT shop. They do time tracking. One of the most miserable things you could ever do to an individual, right? It's not fun, but it's part of their reality. Well, they found that when they went to do time tracking, I spent 1 hour in development the last week on this, there wasn't a bucket for it. There was a bucket for project A, project B, project C, but there was no place for me to account for development time. Well, really, I think we can solve that problem, right? So build that in there, but it also told you to circle back to the beginning. They've had this fancy software for many years. They focused on employee development for years, right, to improve employee engagement scores. They never closed the loop. How is it after all this time and after all these years, team members don't have such a basic ability such as tracking their time for development? Sometimes you have to get into the weeds. That's where they work. So by doing a bunch of these actual actions, we can operationalize the work and make it real, completely close the loop, and try to remove all the root causes that prevent actual employee development. Okay? The last, second to last step in operationalize is asking the initial question again. So we started out with a list of a dozen struggles that team members have. They went and spent 2 hours of their time away from their normal day jobs to focus on skill development approach, right? Did we actually help? Did what we, anything we did over the last 2 hours actually help in any way at all? And so we go back and we review the initial questions, close the loop. Turns out, I've never had 100% of the questions resolved based on 2 hours of work, but over 50%. I know how to develop my skill. I know what's expected of me. I know where to go to learn. Right? These big things have been resolved. 2 hours of work. It's not too shabby. Some of the results. So we're working through the actual metrics related to this. I thought I'd just share a couple of the initial ones. There's a lot more to come. So personal development plans. So every employee in this 600 IT team member area was supposed to have a personal development plan every year for years. Know how many actually had personal development plans before doing this workshop? Well, we told them to do it. Why didn't they do it? So measuring current personal development plans is an output measure, right? They actually have something that demonstrates that they're making progress on this. Conversion of reds to green is another one, and we're working through the logistics of getting that, pulling that out of the system. Skills, we actually have a large bank of skills now, over 3,200 skills identified across 600 individuals. It's kind of slick. And again, that second row that I showed you in the beginning, this is where we're trying to start coordinating skills across teams. One of the initial debates I had with the executive leadership team is, shouldn't we identify all these skills in advance and then go through these exercises so that we have them coordinated across teams? That sounds beautiful. Sounds like a great Disneyland experience. I've never been there myself. So short of nirvana, let's do this a little more organically, right? Because it'll take years, honestly, to do something like that. And we can make progress today in helping out team members. So let's just get started. We'll work on the coordination piece later. Some additional proposed measures I mentioned, conversions of reds to green. We can actually, since we have specific actions related to individual development plans, we should be able to track completion of those actions, right? Make sense? And the final step of step 5 is we have team members take pictures. So I want to show you this because this is real. This is what it actually looks like at the end. Done this with over 40 teams personally. I've grandparented, and great-grandparented facilitators for these workshops now. This is spread globally, not only in the US, Europe, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, China, Australia. Done this with teams of 3 people. Tried to limit it to teams of 12 people. I've run this with 3 teams at the exact same time using co-facilitators. Team members hold on to these pictures. They put them on their desks. It actually matters to them. It was a moment in time where they actually spent time to develop and care about their employees. Proof for them. Now, so this could be a whole nother talk, and Dr. McGee and I talked about this a little bit. This has started to spread into administrative space, like I said, and team members wanted to do something a little more than taking a picture of their marker board and printing it off and posting it in their space. Everybody wants to electronically track this, right? So the teams, the companies that have done this, like Nationwide Insurance, they have about 9,000 people in IT that they do this with. They always just go to Excel. They create an Excel spreadsheet, right? They're not doing any math in it, but it's a simple way because of the tab format to track this stuff electronically. And they turn the fluency wheel into 4 boxes that are by each other, and they set up a matrix that way, right? And I saw this, I'm like, yep, I guess we'll do the same thing. And then I had a moment. Right? So I went through entrepreneurial approach once before, invented a product related to asthma that got into the market. So I'm like, well, this really just seems like a ridiculous way in this age to be able to track skills and development in Excel, because it wasn't really designed for that. So I partnered with a global IT organization, and we actually developed a software for it. And so disclosure, yep, this is related to, I have a financial interest in this. I'm not sharing this to sell it at all, sell the software at all. I'm sharing this to sell behavioral science. We can do really cool things. We took a tool that's been around for a long time in a tangential field, but related field, and pivoted and created a software application that's already been purchased and is now on the market with future client sales proposed, just by doing a basic thing with behavioral science. And the cool thing is, this is a billboard now for behavioral science, right? This is us, people. There's no reason the rest of us can't do the same thing. And so I'd like to do a talk on this someday on the steps to partner with the organization, negotiation of the contract and all that kind of stuff, IP, intellectual property. But we can do this. We can actually make a difference on a global scale. All right, time check. Really? Oh, excellent. All right. So let me pull this back up. Okay. If you want to learn more about this, so just a tangent. Started out as a behaviorist, then I started to learn about some of these other improvement fields that are out there. I learned about Six Sigma because the company that I worked for was paying for us to learn it. They partnered with GE. GE came in, taught us. There's belt levels, white, yellow, green, black belt, and black belt certified, all that kind of stuff. Don't use the Six Sigma stuff. Lean good, Six Sigma. But initially, I felt like a traitor. Right? And I actually talked to I worked with a department, a team of behaviorists, and like, are we traitors for learning about this other approach? No, we're scientists. Why would we limit what we learn? So learn from it, see, be an informed consumer, and be informed as to whether or not this is actually something that can contribute to our own science. Right? So I learned about Six Sigma, then I started reading about lean and all the, mostly I worked in administrative spaces, didn't work in a lot of manufacturing spaces. I learned about single minute exchange of dice, SMED. It's a really big thing. Learned about 5S, it's another really big thing, and completely dismissed it. I said, this is all manufacturing, I work in administrative space, HR, finance, IT, this doesn't apply at all. And then I had to do a check. Say, well, I'm not able to really speak intelligently to these examples. So I kept reading, I kept studying, and I found out actually there was a lot more to it. So I'd like to share the list with you. There's some good websites, there's some good books to learn more about this stuff. They're seeing a lot of the same things that we're seeing, right? They're saying it differently. They honestly, a lot of times they don't know why it works. And we're really good at explaining why it works and the nuances of changes that they could do from can do to have done that would make it way better, right? So I would just like to propose self-study, learning a little bit more about the stuff yourself, and then we sound like we can carry on a conversation, debate these topics when we're meeting with executives, and see where the overlaps between behavioral science and lean, code production system, continuous improvement overlap. We can be the ones that advise them to say, this is where it can help and complement your program, this is where it can replace it, and this is where you should make adjustments. We can be the ones that make those advertisements, those statements, instead of the other consulting companies that don't know jack about behavioral science, but will say they do. Yes, sir.
If you encountered the book Leading Doctors,
Yes, yes.
it's a really cool introduction if you don't know anything about me, because we've all been the patient going through the process.
Yes, I worked in healthcare for 10 years.
Yeah.
In all aspects, labs, radiology, primary care, emergency care, and the how healthcare has embraced these improvement methodologies over the last 10 years has been amazing, right?
And that book is so simple, you can get it fast, and then you can get more technical about it.
It is, and there's an organization called ThedaCare in Wisconsin. They're considered the Toyota of healthcare, right? They're the ones that have adopted this the most, and the reason they did it is because their CEO saw the light. He, I shouldn't say this, but he'll state this, but he believes that his organization killed people, and he took it to heart. And he went into root cause, identified it was ridiculous that it's happened, and there's been a lot of examples of wrong patient deaths, right? And so he was on the board of an organization called Aaron Snowblowers, right? Snowblowers over Wisconsin. And he got talking with those guys and said, how is it that you're able to keep your manufacturing jobs in the US when all your competitors are shipping them to other places, right, for lower labor? It's like, oh, we do lean. I have no idea what that means. What are you talking about? Goes, well, if you really want to learn, this is how you learn. You come into my factory and you help me build snowblowers. Then you help do problem solving on why we're unable to make snowblowers better with higher quality, faster delivery, lower costs, happier people, things like that. And so he learned problem solving in a manufacturing setting and then took it back to his healthcare organization and implemented that approach that he learned. And they actually have better KPIs, key performance indicators, than Mayo. It's fascinating stuff. Okay. Questions?
Can you recap how you choose the skills that go on the matrix before you start the exercise?
Yes. So so that's a bit of a struggle. I like to, and the debate always comes up, well, which ones do we do? And when I did it in an uncontrolled fashion, it turned into a justify my existence exercise, right? So the team would come up with every potential skill ever that they could possibly use, and we'd end up with a list of 100 things. That's not that, okay, this isn't gonna approach, what do I do? And so then I started referring back to the approach itself. And we said, what are the top 10 high demand skills that are required of your team on a weekly basis? That did wonders. Then they started to think, well, what is the demand of our team on a weekly basis, right? And so each of the individuals on the team would bring that up, and we would work through, and we were able to prioritize it that way. So high demand skills, and we took it a little step further and said business high demand skills, right? So in the IT department, they're basically customers of the other administrative functions, right? They take requirements. What do you need from IT from other areas? So that did wonders.
So you work with everybody that's going to be on the matrix to choose the skills that they're going to be.
Yes, I have the team do that also, and so there's moments throughout the workshop where the team is the primary decision maker and the leader is secondary, and then there's moments where that switch, where the leader is primary and the team is secondary. An example of that is prioritization. Typically, the team leader should have greater line of sight of the priorities for the team for the next year, right? Yes?
So with IT being having the most disengaged individuals in an organization, and the move from traditional IT to digital business IT, where is behaviors in all this? Are you defining skills as behaviors?
Yes, so for IT, honestly, I thought it would be harder, and it ends up being easier because we tend to use the hard skills for IT. So most of the skills that they use are coding specific, program specific.
So there's no behaviors.
Well, coding Java, I would say, is a behavior. And there's tangible outputs and artifacts that we can actually measure. Good code versus bad code is something that's very measurable.
Okay, I'm talking more like emotional intelligence behavior.
Soft skills, right? So soft skills are the part that we do after the hard skills, because if they're for the first time getting introduced to this approach, it's good for them to learn the model on hard skills, which are less debatable than the soft skills. And so the example that I used earlier was leading as a soft skill. So that's highly debated.
And so this is all accomplished in a 1-2 hour workshop.
Yeah.
How do you cram that all in?
A lot of experiments, a lot of practice, a lot of changing of the approach over time. So the nice thing about doing it 40 times, this is a lot of experiments, right? And how it's been replicated, we've been able to see what works and what doesn't. But it's modularized. So I had to structure it, so that there's a specific language and wording that's used for module 1, specific language wording that's used for module 2, right? And stick to that, right? Another way to cram it all in is to use language that's not offensive, right? An example of that is avoiding the word assessment as much as possible. Every time I've used that word, it turns into a death spiral debate for 20 minutes, right? Well, back 10 years ago when they did assessments, just like what you're about to do to us, right? They ranked 5 people out of our department, and I had to do 2 jobs, right? So these things come up when we talk about individuals' skills. So using different language, talking about fluency, right, avoids a lot of those issues.